Aaron, good to see you. As we were chatting in the green room, it's been about a decade or so. I know you are in the UK, and I just want to give you a shout out because I know at the height of releasing predictable revenue and all the stuff you were doing, really around the entire ecosystem, but you were super, super helpful and so generous with your time back then when I was doing all those like startup sales things and stuff. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, when was that? That was a long time ago. Feels like a long
Yeah,
time.
I think I guess now looking back, it's been about 12 or 13 years, perhaps, something like that.
I don't remember if
Yeah,
I got married 13 years ago. So that seems
yeah.
like a time ago too.
But let's dive into predictable revenue and all the stuff that for me baffles me because you were one of the folks that really helped me think about being super focused, right?
Hmm.
Not spamming, not being unprepared, those sort of things. Why do you think that the predictable revenue model has been getting so much, I don't know, attention and seems to be, sort of negative attention as of late? I have my own theories, but I wanted to actually hear it from you, from the individual who actually invented the model.
Sure. Well, yeah, I wrote Predictable Revenue. We published it 2011, and every once in a while, there's always people who I can't tell how much of it's good marketing for they want to have a controversial point, or if they actually believe like predictable revenue is dead, or SDRs are dead, or that sort of thing. Um, like you said, I don't read them that much online, but or like everyone who's spamming and doing outbound is dead, outbound is evil, outbound is all this other stuff, and like first, I don't really have, well, I don't really care one way or the other. By the way, I left the predictable revenue company and all that stuff behind a few years ago. Um, and so, and even when I was there, like the main thing I want people to understand is, what's going to work for you. And so, yeah, if people who say predictable revenue is dead, or SDR job is dead, and AI is going to replace it, or outbound outbound is bad because interrupting, or which is different than saying other things work better. Like they didn't read the book. Maybe they're just being dramatic for the sake of marketing. Maybe they don't understand what it's actually about. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
That's what I think. I think that there's a little bit of all of the above, right? Especially these days, with LinkedIn being such a prominent channel and folks wanting to post content and post opinions on there. That's my initial grasp that they are looking for hot takes and things like that
Yeah, get
to
attention.
post.
Yeah, get some followers, get some likes. So maybe we should go over what the actual fundamental ideas of the book Predictable Revenue were and are.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do that because there's some ideas there that I don't believe are going to change. They're going to be applicable, for the indefinite future. And some stuff that's dated and can work. Like anytime you've got tactics, and it's one of the tricks with books is want to put in some details that are useful enough. But sometimes with tactics, whether how to write an email, make a phone call. I'm trying to think of something else. There's some stuff in the predictable revenue book, but it doesn't have to be that book. It's almost like the more specific and more tactical it is, the faster it will become outdated as the world moves on. But originally, the predictable revenue book, whether you've read it or not, had like three or four like key ideas, big ideas that I think were fundamental. The first was, well, by the way, this is all first learned by creating an outbound sales team at Salesforce.com. The quick story: I had a company, it failed. I'm like, I need sales. Got an entry level job at Salesforce. It's like I'll figure things out, and created an outbound prospecting team that generated almost doubled Salesforce.com's growth in the enterprise market. So hundreds of millions or $1 billion or more in revenue by now. I have no idea. And then I consulted with clients. And so through trial and error, the ideas I saw really that worked for people, that people liked and worked first were this idea of specialization, which is probably the most fundamental idea. So specialization is you take the old idea, and now we've got a lot of people who've been in sales. Maybe if you're 20s or 30s, you may not realize it wasn't that long ago The way sales worked was if you had 5 salespeople and you wanted to double revenue in a B2B company, you usually just doubled your salespeople because you'd expect them to do prospecting, to close accounts, maybe get some leads, maybe from marketing, and manage customers. Okay, that was the way it was always done. And so what Salesforce did, and some companies did, but I really emphasized in the predictable revenue book, was specialization, which is really, to an extreme degree, taking the jobs to be done and dividing them up around your team so people could do fewer things better. So in a B2B software company or B2B company, often what that looked like was you've got prospectors who prospect, inbound lead response who responded to marketing leads, kind of account executives who sold new customers, and a bunch of different jobs after the sale, like customer success, onboarding, renewals, and so on for current customers. Now, that doesn't mean that if AI replaces SDRs, which it won't, the predictive model is dead, because predictable revenue is never about just outbound. It was never about just SDRs. That part was about specialization. And for example, in the world of AI, in general, we're not going to have fewer options. We're always going to have more. So SDRs will still work, but probably in more specific situations. AI will work. AI plus SDRs will work. It's kind of all these flavors of how you mix AI and SDRs together. There's just more options. Okay, so that's one point. But specialization is as important, more important than ever. Like the busier the world gets, specialization is one of the best ways, if not the best, to help keep people in any job, I wouldn't say sane, but focused on fewer things and doing them better. That was the main idea. Because if you don't specialize the right way, anything else you do, whether it's lead generation, however you take that, could be inbound, respond to inbound leads, outbound, if you have partners, signing deals and so on, they're not going to work as well, right? So even in that book, prospecting doesn't work well unless you've got people dedicated to it. Customer success doesn't work well, or could always be better when you have people dedicated to it. Sometimes you can get things started part-time, but to really make it work well and then scale it if you need to, people need to be dedicated. So that's one idea. Second idea, seeds, nets, and spears. It's just the idea that different leads have different aspects. And this is really about people. If you don't know people, so, 3 types of leads. Like there's some relationship-based where there's some prior trust or relationship called seeds. They're always going to have faster sales cycles, higher win rates, so on. So that funnel and those metrics will look different than, call them nets, which would be marketing-generated leads, casting a wide net, right? A lot lower percentage of leads that are going to be qualified, usually on average of a smaller deal amount, probably close faster because they've done some research. And again, all that different in those metrics, different than outbound generated, which could be through prospecting, through email, LinkedIn, or there's all kinds of things. It doesn't mean necessarily cold outbound, but outbound. And that can be done to kind of other divisions of current customers. There's lots of flavors of outbound. And so when people, there's always different influencers. It changes. It was HubSpot back in the day, who like outbound bad, inbound good, which of course they do outbound now. Everyone, when they're usually early, like, oh, outbound, it's like you always want to like create amazing content and draw people to you. Yes, amazing. Doesn't mean outbound is bad. It means at some point when you get big enough and you're not hitting your goals just with inbound, then you layer outbound on, if it's a good fit for your business. It's not always a good fit. And again, the last thing is those metrics, again, are different because when you have tons of inbound leads, usually great when you have like lots of smaller customers and they've done their research, so faster sales cycles. But a lot of the bigger companies and bigger deals aren't doing the research. They don't know they've got a problem that you can solve. And when you do reach out to them, and it's slower and lower win rates, but the deals should be way bigger, 3 times bigger on average, 5 times bigger, 10 times bigger on average than inbound. So those are 2 for now. I'll pause there. I got a last big idea after we digest those 2.
Yeah, well, thank you for going through that because as you can see, folks, it was never about let's just spam a bunch of people with technology and these sort of things, right? And it was very much about, again, that specialization and the focus. And I wanted to speak to something quickly. How could you, because there's been a lot of discussion now, like, oh, you should have full cycle salespeople, go back to that. model, which worked at certain organizations. And I think that, the predictable revenue model really allowed me to start to dig into that segmentation in a more scientific way. But to your point around, if you focus on certain parts of the funnel and you double down on that, and assuming you're doing it right, right, you're going to have more productivity around that. So if you have top of the funnel SDRs
Mhm.
that are just focused on appointment setting and qualification and doing great handoffs, your AEs or those folks working the rest of the sales cycle are going to be more productive because they're going to have more and they're going to be able to actually focus on actually following up properly, actually putting business cases together in a comprehensive way and not have to context switch. Because we all know as salespeople that to prospect really well, to your point earlier, you said, just to kind of reiterate, you have to be focused on it's a different animal versus actually putting business cases together and digging in on existing deals where you have discovery and you have all this context and you got to map out the accounts and all that sort of stuff. So for me, the idea that we would now regress just doesn't make sense. And now I get that there's sales cycles out there that justify, for whatever reason, there's a couple variables out there that we could probably speak to that
Yep.
justify maybe having one person work the entire motion or cycle. I get it, but like in B2B SaaS, and I would even argue even outside of that, right? There's plenty of different models or products, I should say, that still justify specialization.
Oh yeah, for sure. So again, I don't want to say like one thing is, it's not that one thing is better than the other. So that full cycle is better than specialized or vice versa. The world is like specialization works. How you apply that can be done in a general sense. Like full cycle salespeople can be a form of specialization. It's more like what's the right fit for you as a company and culture. And the people who say, "Oh, full cycle," yeah, I think I've seen some posts that, "Hey, specialization doesn't work. Instead, we need to go back to full cycle." I'm like, that's horrible advice for most people. I'm sure there's people who've built a team of salespeople who do full cycle outside. Like, there's some industries where this happens a lot, like financial services, but it's a very specific kind of culture. It's very specific kinds of hiring. There's pros and cons to all this. The cons to full cycle sales for most companies, because there are places where it's probably the best way to go, like example, like highly transactional, small deals, very like one place for specialization that where the salesperson should do also like prospecting / lead, throwing all their stuff, as if it's kind of like one or two or three calls type to close. It's really a simple sale. And the cost of like passing back and forth, even when done well, isn't worth it when it's like a simple sale, small deal size and so on. There's probably lots of those kinds of cases. But in general, like B2B SaaS, trying to, again, create a team where everyone's able to successfully do like there's advantages to full cycle selling, right? But to build a team that they all do it well and it's effective, like, wow, but so hard. Some of the advantages, by the way, are listed out. And there's certain phases where full cycle makes sense. Like if you're early and you're still figuring out kind of like your sales process, even like a CEO is still selling, or maybe you have one or two salespeople and you're still kind of figuring it out. How do we prospect? What's the messaging? Who's our ideal client? How do we sell? How do we price? It can make a lot of sense to do full cycle there because you're still learning. So the main goal isn't growth. The main goal is learning. Like that makes total sense. And then as you start to learn, you're like, oh, okay, now we know how these things work. We can start to specialize. So people can really like nail this area, like whether it's prospecting, closing, customer success, and so on. That makes sense. I just don't. And salespeople should do some prospecting, but not cold, high volume prospecting. I'm actually going to stick to that. I don't know. I can't imagine that working successfully unless you get really special edge cases and cultures. But for most companies, doing outbound could include outbound. Again, it's all flavors. But business development for salespeople, they should do some. But it's probably more like 10 to 20, 30, maybe types of targets, current customers, special deals, partners, and so on, like targeted. or it's probably more relationship based. They can a smaller number they can build relationships with. So I think that one also important idea is to take the idea of specialization, and probably the most important implementation of that was really started the idea that you're breaking apart the salespeople who close and lead generation, because that was really where the problem was in the past, where the salespeople were expected to do all their own kind of lead gen, which includes responding to marketing leads themselves, and prospecting and close customers. So if you break apart lead generation of whatever that looks like and the selling part, that was a big deal. And the predictable lead generation is what would create predictable revenue. Right? That was, I think, different ways to explain the value of specialization.
Awesome. Well, thank you for walking through that, and hopefully folks get, especially the folks who have not read it or maybe are just reading stuff online. And by the way, don't just take our word for it. Think about what works best for your business, as Aaron mentioned
Yeah.
a couple of times. And don't, for the love of God, also don't just read LinkedIn posts and take that also as sort of the source of truth. Do your diligence, figure out what works for you, and make decisions based off of that.
Yeah. But it's no different than if you're on Instagram and people are like, oh, you need to eat carnivore. Or other people are like, oh, you need to be vegan. Well, no, you don't. Like, you get to kind of try things to see what fits with your situation. Same thing. You need to, even though you need to specialize. Well, you got to figure it out for yourself what works. For some people, cold outbound works really well. Others it doesn't. Full cycle could be great for some people. For a lot of people, it won't be. Who knows? So you got to take all that advice with a grain of salt. Founder-led content. Guys like Adam Robinson and or even like the Justin Welsh types, Josh Braun types.
Yeah.
Right. When it's a good fit, can be amazing. For a lot of people, they can't do that. They don't want to. It's just, you got to find your thing.
Absolutely. Well, let's speak a little bit to why you left sales and what you're up to now. I know you're working on a couple different ventures, helping leaders, but I know you've also expanded into other areas.
Yeah. Um, I left. I wouldn't know if I'd say I left. I did leave sales, like B2B sales and sales consulting and predictable revenue. I had a business and I did quite well, over, like a dozen years. The book. So there's predictable revenue, the book, and a sequel called From Impossible to Inevitable. And you're right, both books were a lot about focus, how to focus on the right customers with the right type of lead generation and the right product and so on. And I think the books are also really about treating people with honesty and respect, whether it's your team, your sales team, or your customers. And I think maybe those are the two main themes, including process and things. True, but I think everyone talks about process, and I think like that's one of the things I think that is going to be less important over the years, especially with AI, where we need more of people able to connect with other people's hearts, not just their minds, to build more trust. And like relationship building to me is going to be one of the most important thing. Hello, Mr. Interloper. You're using a computer. I am not right now. It's my 7-year-old. Hello, thank you, Bellatrix. So, yeah. So with those books, and for years, I have 10 children. Right? And I got married 13 years ago. So there was and the book was published 13 years ago, not a coincidence. I got married and I was like, oh, shit, I got to make more money. Because we had 2 kids from my wife's first marriage from day one, or even before that. Then, she was pregnant very soon. And then every year we'd like adopt a baby, adopt and then have a baby, then adopt and have a baby and adopt and adopt. And so we had 10, from 0 to 10 kids in like 10 years. And so, I just got burned out. The thing is with sales, I never really loved sales. It's not a passion of mine. I was good at it. And I made a lot of money at it. The books drove like 50 million to my businesses over that time. I made a good chunk that way. But at some point, between having a big family and just being physically and emotionally exhausted, the financial demands of a huge family, Just hit the walls. I didn't. It wasn't a great fit with my old business partner. It's just like I have to leave this. I got to find something. At the point where I had nothing left, and it's like if I don't find something that I like to do that feeds me, kind of my soul, like the actual activity. I still need to make money. I still need to make a lot of money. But if I don't find some kind of work that really feeds something I want to do, I'm not gonna make it. And I knew that even with predictable revenue, with AI and all the other stuff in the world, I'm like the companies just, I don't see it like getting some sort of breakthrough, growing faster, unless there was like a new book or some new breakthrough idea or some other thing. And I didn't have it in me to do that in that area. Didn't have the energy to do it. Didn't want to do it. Didn't have a passion for it. So I was really good at it, but I think underlying it was more of a passion for it's like people, ideas, and how people fit together. Which that's why looking back, how predictable revenue was really about, and even sales, like kind of people and how they kind of come together. I mentioned seeds, nets, and spears. The reason those are different is because those different areas are kind of different situations that people know each other or don't. So it's like, and how's that dynamic? So to me, that's where 3 years ago left predictable revenue, and it was quite terrifying, honestly, because I'm like, how am I going to support the family? This is a brand that all my money came from, my whole audience, all the money that used it, and how would I replace that? So it was going to be bought out for 4 years, and I feel like, okay, 4 years to recreate something new, even that didn't feel like that much time. So it lasted for like a year and a half before the company was kind of struggling and couldn't pay me anymore. But since then, it's just like I was like, I need to find something that I like to do, that I get some fulfillment from for the work itself. So what does that even mean? It's like I couldn't do like sales consulting or working with sales clients. I mean, I tried some advisory. I sat on some boards. Like, that was okay, but I'm like, still, even most boards, not all, it's just wow, really boring and like not honestly run very well. And it wasn't feeding me. And so now, like, oh, okay, what do I actually like to do? I was okay. I want to go back to writing books, um, but different kinds of books. Someone asked, would I write like the modern sales Bible? I'm like, no. Would I have fun helping someone else, like kind of advising? Sure, could be. I like coaching people on designing their own book, because I like that. I like writing, working on a couple new books now. One called Income Operating System, kind of like how people can make more money, juggling, salaries, freelancing, and investing. And one's called Eat, Shit, and Grow, which is more like kind of crazy stories from having inside the life of having 10 kids and making money to support them. Like I was successful because I had lots of kids. That was why I was successful. I had to make lots of money. I feel like this. Okay, I want to get people together. Maybe it's writing retreats, kind of like book retreats, especially out in nature, and work with my hands, be outside more. So I've got all these kind of like things that are now over 2 or 3 years coming together. I think, oh, okay, there are these things I like to do that I'm interested in, like speaking and new topics. It hasn't kind of coalesced into like a single like main kind of business or way to make money, but it will. And so I 2 or 3 years ago when I first started 2021, there's probably years I was like, I want something, to be interested in that's not, work or family, that's like a hobby. And I just had zero energy for that. And after leaving predictable revenue, I was like, oh, okay, now there are some things I'm interested in. A little bit of that like life, a heartbeat coming back. And at first I was like, can there be work that I love? Like, I want to, find work that I love and make more money at it than I was before. At first, like, is that even possible? Can I even make, how much money can I make? And I've gone from, I have no idea if it's possible, to, okay, it's possible and I believe I'm going to do it. I'm not there yet, but it's going to happen. I just don't know exactly when or how.
How do you recommend that people go through that journey of finding what they're most passionate about, the journey or maybe a process that people could take to, find their passion, because I think everyone's, especially like the last couple years, I think, we've experienced a lot of pretty astonishing and consciousness rocking stuff that's happened on the planet. And I think it's led a lot of people to question a lot of their passions and things like that. Is my observation. Do you have any advice for folks, or again, like any sort of steps or a process, especially someone who's been highly successful in the tech industry, which I think a lot of people have strived to do, and you've reached these really incredible heights, but now, to your point, or your journey, are have been kind of moving towards really, what sounds to me, a more authentic uh journey or pursuit.
Yeah. I mean, my phone died surprisingly, so let's see. Hopefully, this will work better. Um, I wouldn't call it more authentic. I think it's a different. Yeah, everyone's as authentic as they can. That was. I think it's more like aligned with who I am. So you actually could be authentic, But even when I was doing sales, I knew it wasn't something I loved. I liked helping clients, and I liked, I wouldn't have said, "Oh, this is, I love this," and I like, writing books, and so I think it's kind of like what feels more aligned with who I am as a type of work. What feels more like me? Because I always did feel a separation. It's kind of like there's like work and sales and that, and there was my life with a family. And I felt, okay, there's probably some way to blend them more. At least for me, that's not true for a lot of people, but like it should be more blended somehow, some way.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm a lot closer towards that. Because even the new keynote I'm working on is kind of about this journey. So like if someone else was, I don't know advice, but I do think that what's worked for me, and in this I talk about these 5 levels, like kind of when you're starting something new, like a new job or maybe new even relationship, like you're inspired, right? And after that, you kind of get down to being competent, and then if you keep going, you maybe treading water, and you're basically going down until you hit the wall, like the abyss, I call it. And for me, um, you know, hitting the wall, whether you call it burnout or I did probably was similar to like I was married and divorced before my current one. It's that kind of burnout. That wall can also be a trampoline, and like forced me to come back to figure out what I knew what wasn't working, what would work. Um, I have another interloper over here. There's no safe place. 10 kids. There's only 8 here at home right now. Um, but I think a lot of it was first realizing it's not like some workshop I went to, or some book I read, and there's like some breakthrough. It's been about a little over 3 years now, kind of slow and steady, just taking care of myself. Like, so for me, and the kids were getting a bit older, right? So if the kids were starting to be like 4 or 5, the youngest, and leaving that work that was just not a fit, I had a bit more energy to sleep, going for walks, starting to exercise, still sporadic, but for me, like basic self-care. So sleep is probably number one. Just some bit more free time to kind of like think and wander. That was a start. And then really tuning in and kind of paying attention to discern, what do I actually like? Because lots of times, even in the beginning, like I have no idea what I want to do. Like, what do I like? I don't know. And then once in a while, there'd be like an ad on Instagram for this little Arduino programming thing. I was like, that's cool. And I got that, like home programming, which I did. And it was fun, like 30 Days Lost in Space. Or idea, a guy reached out, a business partner, hey, there's this book idea. Do you want to do this book with me? I was like, that's a great idea. I'm like, okay, yeah. I don't want to write the book myself, but I'd like to help you with that. Or then, invited to do a talk about something. I was like, I don't want to talk about X, but what about I could talk about Y, like these new kind of,
Well,
yeah.
Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story, clarifying the predictable revenue model too for the folks out there. If folks wanted to maybe get in contact with you, follow your content, or learn more about what you're up to these days, what are the best channels or URLs to reach you?
We'll see. I'm on LinkedIn, although I have a lot of, I don't know if I think people can message me, or just Aaron-Ross.co.
Awesome.
not com, aaron-ross.co.